Hi, and welcome to the first Film 5.0 podcast. I'm Linda Gacsko, and this is my co-host and co-founder of Film 5.0, Steve Hiller. On today's podcast, we'd like to introduce ourselves to you and give you a little background on our film career. So Steve is going to start us off on his journey in the film business.
Hi, I am Steve Hiller. My film career actually started after I'd served in the Marines for a couple of years. I went to film school back in Chicago, and right out of film school, I got very lucky that I always wanted to be in camera, and that's what I studied. I got very lucky and went right on to a movie in Chicago called Blues Brothers. And it was a stroke of luck, but as the business goes, once you establish yourself, things hopefully, if you do a good job, things continue. And for me, they did. And I stayed an assistant for probably 25 years, moving from second to a first to a focus puller. And then I became an operator until I retired. And my last film was Anchorman. That was a good film to go out on. And now we're doing documentaries.
All right. And so I started out basically, loving film. I think that's something that we usually all have in common when we get into this industry, is that you have a love of film. And I always wanted to do something with film. So I was lucky enough to get on a couple commercials and see what the cameras did and who was working them, and talk to those people and make connections. And then I decided to go to Victor Duncan Chicago, which became Panavision Chicago. And I was a prep tech there for a little over a year, and that's where I met Steve. He was one of the guys that would come in, and I would prep the cameras, and Steve was always really great to talk to. He was always very nice, a lot of really great advice, and again, just an easy person to talk to. So I decided that I wanted to get into the union, because if you want to work on major motion pictures and TV shows, you needed to be in the union. So he encouraged me to get in union, and I believe I had 3 reference letters. One was from Steve and then 2 other assistants, and I got in the union. My very first film was Groundhog Day, and Steve actually was the person who helped get me that film, and I didn't know it until about a year later. So I started out on Groundhog Day as a loader and worked my way up. I think my second or third film was with Steve as his assistant on The Fugitive. And from there we worked almost 20 years together, and it was a great ride, and we had a lot of fun. We worked very hard. But I thought, and I still think, that we were a very good team. So Steve is retired, and I'm continuing in the industry in being a first and camera operator. And, I still have a love for film, and I know Steve does as well, because, we're always talking about what we've seen on, TV or what movie we've watched. So, so that's pretty much our background and how we met. All right, so one of the things that we wanted to talk about is our goals for these podcasts. We're currently working on doing seminars and going out to teach people the very basic things that we've figured out, right, and worked on and know. And we're just trying to give our expertise to younger and different people, so that maybe they have a better understanding of things. So we're working on those seminars, and we're going to hopefully roll those out soon. But we thought we would do a podcast. And so our goals are to, this one, to tell you a little bit about ourselves, right, Steve? Yeah. And then we're hoping to have guests on in the industry, and we also were hoping to have maybe some up-and-coming people, to tell you about their story and how they got in the industry, because everybody's got a story, right, Steve?
Everybody has a story, without a doubt. So, like in our when I finished my career, people would say, "Well, you should write a book." Well, our seminar is that book because it's like, I mean, when I think about all the experiences that I've had, and believe me, don't get me going because I could talk about. I have stories, and so does Linda. So instead of the book, we thought, well, let's share what we've learned in person, to, in the form of a seminar, because we've certainly got the material and we've certainly got the information. I can't say that I'm an expert in any one particular thing, but I'm knowledgeable in a lot of things, and Linda definitely is. And so that's what we thought we would do. We're writing a book with our seminar. So,
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good way to put it. A book would be great, but you don't quite get the feeling and telling the stories. I think one of the things that attracted me to this business once I got in it, sort of locked it in, was I went out to a set that Steve was working on as a first assistant, and I was still working at Panavision, and I had to go out and service the camera, and so I came to the set, and I think it was Father Jim.
Father Jim.
Remember Father Jim? Yeah.
Roger Daltrey.
Yeah, Roger Daltrey, right?
Roger Daltrey, yeah.
And it was my very first time, like, on a film set. So I was coming to work on the video tap or something that Panavision sent me out, and I had known Steve. He'd prepped many times, and it was it was just really interesting to be there and see everything that was going on. And yeah, I got to stay and watch a couple scenes. It was really cool.
Yep, that's we had actually met before that because, like, when Linda was a prep tech, and one of the procedures is, as an assistant, you go into a rental house, and in my case, most of the time it was Panavision, and you go through all the gear that you're about to use, and the prep tech, in this case Linda, would be the person that pulls out all the gear, as per your list or the cameraman's list, and all the things you're going to check out and go over and prep. And that's how we met, basically. And the day that she'd come out on our set, I already knew her, but she had not been on a set before. So then later, when I'd been working films, and I knew that she was more than ready to go on a set. And when they were about to do Groundhog Day, I knew the assistants on the job, and I knew that they were looking for somebody. And I recommended Linda, and they took me up on it, and the rest was history for her. And then after Groundhog Day, she pretty much worked for me after that, almost all the films until I retired. But that's where we started, and I'd already been in the business for 10 years then, but that's where we started, and it's been a good
Yeah.
good run.
Yeah, I used to, after I first I actually met Steve a couple days before my mother passed away, and as we were talking, realized they both had the same birth date, not year, but date. And I thought, well, that was quite interesting. And I met him with his daughter, Allie. They were coming in, I think you had just gotten home from working on a film. And you brought Allie in. It was the year of the cicada, because she
was like 8.
Yeah, she had a cicada keychain. And so I met Steve, and he was coming in to talk or do something. He said, well, I'll be in a few more days to prep. And so I said, oh, okay. So he came in, and I was really new at that point. And I had been working in grip and electric, because the way it worked back then was you went into grip and electric to learn all of that, but you went in there basically to learn the paperwork, because back before everybody was scanning barcodes, you had to write everything down. So it was actually really great to learn all the lights and what a Hollywood set is, and test things and dollies. And then I finally moved up to camera, and again, basically the week I moved up, that's when I met Steve. And then he said, well, I'll be in a couple days because I'm prepping. I don't know if it was a commercial or another feature.
No memory, I don't know.
Yeah. And so from then on, as soon as I became a prep tech and got up to speed, whenever I saw Steve's name that, in the morning, I'd grab his things because he was one of the nicer assistants to me. They were all great guys. And guys, by the way, there was only one female, and she didn't work a lot. So when I would see Steve's, work order up there, I'd pull it right away, and I knew what he liked. I knew that he liked the curly cable on the zoom gun. I knew what zoom gun he liked. So little things like that I think helped me not only work well with Steve and prep a package that he needed and wanted. It was faster, and it also showed him that I was able to, pick up on those little things and, make his prep hopefully easier and better.
Yeah, well, and that translates later on. That translates to the set, because I'm knowing what I like and knowing what I need, to make it work for what I was doing. And then, the other thing, and I was gray-haired. And one thing I remember, I was gray-haired even then, not as much. But one of the things that I tell people is that I learned when I came into business. All the guys that I learned from were the gray-haired old white guys, and I really listened and absorbed, what they taught me. They're pretty much all gone now, but I was gray early. But I tell people now, like if you have that opportunity to be around some of the old timers, and there's not a lot of them anymore, listen up and learn from them, because they have, they may do things a little differently than what you are learning now, but they have things they can tell you, and that's how I learned, and Linda would probably say that's how she learned too. No, sadly nowadays that people are it's only natural to want to hire your peers. But a lot of times, some of the more experienced people are ignored because of that, and because somebody wants to surround themselves with their peers rather than with experience. And, nothing wrong with hiring your peers, but be aware that there are people there that can benefit your production. And sometimes they are the gray-haired guys and the guys that've been around a long time, and you can learn from that. And we'll talk about that too in our seminars.
Absolutely. That's one thing we will talk about in the seminars and also in our podcast as well, because a lot of the people that we worked with, or I still work with, are, we're considered now sort of the elders,
Well, I'm
but Steve's right. When I was coming up, it was the older guys. And by the way, Steve always had gray hair.
I see people now and they go, well, you look the same. And I go, yeah, well, I had gray hair when I was 30.
Yes.
Maybe Vietnam did that, I think. But
yes, and your Irish genes, I think.
I'm a Vietnam veteran, and that had something to do with it, I think.
Yes, yes. And many stories about that as well on set. And when the camera was set up and going, we would have conversations about that. But yeah, I have to agree with Steve, because it worked for me as it did for him, is I wanted to hear from the older guys. Tell me, how's it going? Or they'd say, you know what, when you're slating, do this, angle the slate, or just little things that they knew. And that's who I learned from. That's who was behind the camera and working around the camera. And it was a good thing. I've always gotten along with men very well. So to be in the prep room or on a set with guys all around me, absolutely fine. And again, the knowledge you get from if you get on a film set and you don't learn something every day, something's wrong, right? I think it's one of the greatest. Every job teaches you, but the film set is just great. It gives you life lessons. I think it's just one of the best places to work, to see the world.
It's a good point about learning, because, and I have to say that, as a focus puller, there was never a film where I didn't learn some other technique, some other way to do my job. And then when I became an operator, I really learned a lot from different people. Like, you know, like I mean, even as something a simple thing like doing an over on somebody, and rather than playing the person in front of you, you play the over. Let the hold on the over and let that person play the scene. And like that's something I, as an assistant, I wasn't paying attention to that. The fact that that's the way you do it over. You let the actor on camera play the scene, and you hold that over, rather than losing it. But just little things like that. And it was one of the older, more experienced guy that told me, here I'm already, been in the business for years, and just told me between takes, just find your over and hold it and let the actor play that scene. And oh yeah, duh, that really works. It's like, and I learned that like only a couple of years before I retired. So there's
Yeah, but
there's always something to learn. So.
absolutely, there's always something to learn. And what also helped you be a good operator, Steve, was the fact that you were a very good assistant. So you knew that job. You knew what that
I mean, kind
your
of.
first stand that was next to you, what they had to do, and how you could communicate. That's a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, there's a difference in the respect that being a focus puller is very, very technical. It's not in the creative realms. Being an operator, I mean, you're definitely in the creative element now, because you make decisions in terms of framing and composition that are now part of the film, and a lot of that is instinct, a lot of that is instruction, a lot of that is designed by somebody else, but a lot of the time it's left on your shoulders to do it, to play something the way you think it should be done. I mean, you'll know quickly if it's not correct, but anyway, but there's, when you become an operator, your instincts come into play, and that, because that's a creative, that's your first step into the creative part of the film industry. Being an assistant is not creative, although you can make choices as a focus puller. They're not creative choices; they're technical choices. But that's the difference, and it's a pretty big step. But some people stay assistants forever, and that's okay. I've debated even myself whether I wouldn't have been better off to do that. Maybe yes, maybe no. But there are people that make a career, but it's a good career, and it's certainly a functioning, important part of the job. I mean, all you have to do is go to a film and see things that are not in focus, and somebody's not doing their job. Because back in my day, I say my day, when we only did everything with a tape measure and marks on the floor, but there's a lot of things we would not have got away with focus-wise. And I remember a film where I had one soft shot during a dolly, one soft shot, and throughout the whole film they were trying to find ways to get back and do that again. It didn't fly. They did not want to let that fly. But nowadays you can't go to a film nowadays and see it without seeing that stuff. And I mean, it's kind of sad. I mean, maybe things are harder, maybe they're not, but I think a lot of it has to do with the way people work. And certainly in our seminars and our podcasts, I'll talk about the way I worked as an assistant and what worked for me. You can certainly incorporate that into some of the new. I mean, we didn't have monitors then. Like, people now using monitors, and there's nothing wrong with that. I wish that I'd had it. There would have been a different way to incorporate that monitor. I would have kept my system, and I would have incorporated the monitor, rather than letting the monitor take over, which in many cases it has. And sadly, some people are very good at it, but I can see it on the screen that it shows that it's different now.
Yeah, we've watched films together, TV together, and we can see it. And Steve's right. I mean, you sit there and you're like, you just, and it's just maybe for a brief second, so, but when we were working, no, not even a buzz.
I love it now, but in some cases now it's not for a brief second. Sometimes
Right.
Sometimes it's a whole shot. It's like, I roll over. It's like, the tolerance level, the acceptance level has changed. Maybe that's a good thing. Maybe, 'cause the bottom line is it's about the story, and maybe, the fact that if I'm directing a film and there's something an actor is performing, maybe I don't worry about that. I'm just saying that from the way I was raised and the way I grew up, that wasn't acceptable. Because an out of focus shot can take away from the story. It makes you realize, oh, there's a camera. Like, you don't want to be reminded that there's a camera and a lens. You want to tell the story. Like again, like, it's a fine line now. Like people to accept it or not to accept it. And say, well, at the same time, you don't want a great performance. Like you don't want to have an actor try to do that again because something was out of focus. Sometimes that's just not going to happen. So all the more reason to get it right.
Right.
It's a tough
I
new
think
way to look at things. So
I think that the standards have been laxed. I do. I'll say
agree.
it. And why for all those years was it, you wanted everything in focus, and now you're okay with, that kind of focus. But getting back to, when we started, the equipment too, like you were saying, there wasn't, you really had to know your craft and your skill. Even as a camera operator, I mean, yes, we usually had that little 9-inch monitor that the director and everybody was looking at, but you had to look through it. You were in control.
Well, I was
And before, think about even before video assist, either the operator was doing it right and had it. You had to trust the DP that they were the alchemist and they were getting. They were lighting and getting the information on the film and the look of the film. I mean, nobody knew what was happening. You assumed that the operator was getting the shots that you wanted. It wasn't until dailies that
Yeah.
all that came together, and it was like, okay, everybody, the DP's doing his job, and the operator's getting what we needed. But
Sometimes
before video assist.
Even focus wise, like sometimes you wouldn't know until the next day. You might have a guess. I always had a sense of if maybe there was something wrong or not, but sometimes you didn't find out till the next day if there was an
Yeah.
issue.
And there's sometimes Steve would say, he knew, I can tell you that he knew when he had something and when he didn't. When there, especially long lens or just really tight shot, he would always go like this after, because you're so intense in what you're doing. And then as soon as they say cut, you're just like, and sometimes he would just go like this, no. And the first AD said, okay, then we'll go again. And then he would send me to dailies. He'd say, I don't want to go to
I'd be
dailies.
afraid to go.
You go to dailies. So I'd walk in and they'd go, oh, Steve doesn't want to come today. I'm like, no, I'm the messenger. So I have to say that 99% of the time, every take was absolutely fine. But you and having been a focus puller for a while, you do know, you have a feeling.
I knew. So.
Right. But he was pretty amazing, I have to say. But he had a system. Steve had a system. And early on, I knew what the system was. And my job as a second was not, everybody thinks, oh, all I did was hit sticks. No, a good part of my job was to assist Steve and make sure that as he is setting up his focus marks and what he needs to do his job, that I was there to facilitate that in any way, whether it was putting green tape on green leaves when Jason Scott Lee would come through the bushes in Jungle Book, to we use tent stakes, golf tees, you name it. Whatever I had to do to help Steve, that was the bulk of my job.
Here, my best example, if I may, we did Courage Under Fire in the desert, and with Denzel Washington. There's a shot, if you see the movie, where he's coming towards the camera on top of his tank. And here's the thing: I was a tank gunner in Vietnam, and I told Linda, I said, tanks they're just dust machines, and like there's going to be so much dust, you're not going to see anything. So, well, I'm at a long lens, and I'm thinking, I would love to be able to put marks out there in the sand, but I know that with this rumbling tank coming at us, you're not going to see anything. So what we did is we put our marks out there and we numbered them, and then Linda with a radio ran alongside of the tank in the in the dust, and in my headset would call out numbers, like number 1 and approaching number 2, and I was pulling focus with those numbers, the marks that I had on the ground. So, and number 3, I couldn't see her, I couldn't see the marks, but I could hear her. So we had a rhythm, and number 4 and number 5. So, and that shot, Denzel was very, very hands-on, and he would run to the monitor after the shot to check focus, and every time we did it a couple of times, but he would run over to see if the focus was good. He understood that, and that's probably one of the harder shots, but it certainly put Linda in a position where I really needed her, and she understood not to say 1, 2, 1, and as I'm moving it, and I'm approaching, so I knew when she's saying and I'm getting to the next number. I mean, all that was very technical and very artistic, and we did it. And if you see the shot of the movie, you'll know how it happened.
Yeah.
And you'll know that Denzel went to see if it happened. So, and it did.
Yeah. Well, and if you remember, Steve, they had a flame bar too,
Oh, yeah.
because it was supposed to be shooting over. And I remember at one point Denzel came to the monitor and he was looking, and he goes, "It looks in focus, but the heat waves."
Yeah, he was.
Yeah. So I believe at one point they even dropped the bar
Yeah,
down.
changed it. Yeah.
Yeah, they changed it because he was in focus, but those heat waves, and as when I saw I forgot that the bar was in there, and I'm thinking to myself, of course, the heat waves are going to make it look like it's soft.
Yeah, so we figured it out and changed that. But
Yeah, so
it would have been
the
okay
rhythm
either way,
was,
but he wanted it to be good. So
yeah. He's so smart, and
yeah,
he's he
very
knows
hands-on, very hands-on.
he knows what's going on. But what we did is when we laid sandbags, and then I would go out with. So I put the sandbag down, and I would go out where the path of the tank was, and Steve would get a focus mark.
Yeah.
So as Steve said, we did that with all the marks, and in between each mark, when the tank was halfway, I would say the word "and," so that Steve knew we were halfway between 1 and 2.
And I knew that I was rolling in the right direction. So
Right, and then I had to make sure that it wasn't the front of the tank, but it was actually when Denzel's eye
well, he
line
was, yes,
hit that.
because it was really tight. I forgot the lens; it was really tight.
It was really tight.
It was a real
And
nasty shot. So.
as he's firing the 50 caliber, you see the shells going off. I had on a purple blue down jacket, and I didn't realize that a lot of the shells were going in my hood. And as we're running, I think it was at the very last one, and we get done, the bunch of stunt guys came over and were just pulling me, and I was like, "What's going on?" They're like, "Those shells are, like burning up in your hood." And I took it off, and they were all singed.
Yeah, they're hot.
But, yeah, it was hot, but I felt something hit me, but I was like, okay, I'm glued into this.
Yeah. Welcome to the war. Yeah.
Yeah, welcome to war. And we had I don't know if you remember, but we were setting up. We did from like Thanksgiving to Christmas. Everything was at night because the nights are longer, and then from January to the end of the movie, it was all day because the light is getting longer. I was like, oh, that's smart. But they had dummies all over the place to represent dead soldiers, unfortunately. And one day I went up, and there was one just laying there. We were getting ready to shoot, and I sort of nudged it. And then one of the Teamsters came over. He was delivering something to Roger Deakins, and And as he was walking back, he kicked one. It was a guy.
An extra.
It was an extra. And I was like, oh my God, I'm glad I didn't do that.
Some of them were mixed. You couldn't tell.
Yeah. But we've done that shot that Steve described quite a few times. Remember the camels in Florida
Oh yeah, yeah, coming over the hill.
coming over the hill the same way I'm calling out, and it's like I'm running and
Tight shot on a camel. She's running next to the camel, but because I couldn't see the camel until it came up over the top of the hill,
right.
and the head appeared before it was at the top of the hill. So she's calling off marks on the other side of the hill. But yeah, that was on Jungle Book. What? No, I forgot some movie we did, TV movie.
Doolittle. I mean, some guy that was talking to the animals or something, and
It's a lot.
yeah, and we did it twice, and the second time I missed the very last mark. And when I came over to the camera, he goes, "What happened to 5?" And I was like, "I fell. I did a face plant."
And we've worked a lot. Working with animals is a whole nother story too. A lot of things to
Exactly.
know about working with animals. And one of my favorite stories was might have been the same movie. I was sitting on the ground next to the camera, and they brought in a male lion.
Oh yes,
We were doing a close up. A male lion's head is beyond belief when you're right next to it. They're really big and quite beautiful. But he put the male lion right in front of me, and right in front of the camera. So I'm staring at it, and the trainer is standing next to me, and I said, "Oh, his eyes are really, really green." And he goes, "You're not looking at him, are you?" and I went. He goes, "Don't stare at him." And I'm like, "How do you not stare at him? He's 2 feet away from me." So I went like this. He goes, "No, don't stare at him because he'll take that as a threat and a challenge." And and he said, "And he might like slap your face off." It's like, why
because
didn't
we
you
were.
tell me that before you put him there? But
No, he didn't, and we were really close to that.
yeah, I mean, he was like this close. But he said,
Yeah.
"Don't stare at him." And I said, "Who knew? How do you not
Well,
stare?"
and remember, they wanted to do lightning strikes behind him.
Oh yeah, yeah.
They wanted to do like heat lightning strikes, and I went over to Steve and I was like, okay, so it's not just that we have a lion in front of us, but he's going to get spooked by
Yeah.
what's going on. That's also where we learned the three things not to be, and you were one of them, which is small, single, and maimed.
Yeah.
You were small,
That was low.
and you were single too.
Yep.
So
And on the sets, they tell people if there's animals around, don't wander off by yourself. Don't bring children, for sure.
and we had a kid on that set
Yeah,
too.
just don't do it. But there's a lot of experience. I had a lot of fun experiences. Who were the actors that told me to pull her pants down? So,
Oh,
on my favorite,
Elizabeth Hurley.
Elizabeth Hurley came out on the set, and I'm on the ground. We're doing the shot looking up, and she had these tights on, and and right away she goes, Steve, pull my pants down. And I'm like, and everybody's like, what? She meant, they were like pedal pushers. She wanted me to pull
She wanted it from the ankle.
the ankles down, like to pull them down. The way she said it, everybody's like, oh, lucky Steve. And I said, and I'm like, what? But it was, it was it's a funny moment afterwards. Everybody goes, oh, well, that was something to remember. Elizabeth Hurley telling you that. And
Yeah.
she was great, and they were all great. There's only been a couple of bad apples, only a couple. So
Yeah. I mean, I remember that moment, and when she goes, Steve, pull my pants down. He was, looking up at her like this, and then I was behind him, and the operator was there, and he went
what?
like that, and she just kept putting her leg out, like pull it down. And
I
I mean, she was nice,
Yeah, she's
but
great.
I never got the inkling that she really knew our names. Obviously, she
She knew my name.
knew our names. I mean, she called me by name, later on.
Yeah.
But sometimes actors are like that. But she didn't have a lot of conversation with us. But obviously, she was aware enough to know who we were.
And speaking of that, one of our seminars happens to be for actors, and that as an actor, it's not a bad thing to learn the names of the crew and stuff. Like Alyssa Milano was one of my favorites too. She saved me on a shot because she understood what I was doing. And in terms of, there was a scene where there was her and somebody else. They were staggered. She was right behind them, but the dialogue was almost overlapping, and I had to pull focus back and forth. And it was becoming an issue because they were overlapping the dialogue, and you know, I was explaining it to the director what was happening, you know, but we didn't want them to have to deliver their dialogue one at a time. It wouldn't have been natural. So, you know, I said, I don't have a split. Sometimes you have a split focus-wise where you can carry both people. But she got it right away. And she goes, no. She just came in. She said, I'll just come in. And she came in right over her shoulder where I did have a split. And she understood it right away. And because she'd been in TV forever. And, but, you know, since she was a child. But she helped me right away. She said, no, I'll just come in. But she knew it. And that's one of the things as an actor. She understood what I was doing, that I was writing focus on the dialogue, and she understood how to fix it, which was good. You know. Right,
she was helpful. All right, well, this gives you a little preview of what you're going to get. Where you're going to have stories. Like we said, if there's one thing you get when you're in the film business is great stories, and we have a lot of them. And the people that we're going to have on will have stories as well. And we're just hoping that you enjoy our stories and learn something, and hopefully, you know, you'll give us some responses back. So if you'd like, you can follow us on Instagram and TikTok at thefilm50. Our webpage is called thefilm50.com. If you'd like to email us, you can at info@thefilm50.com. And all that information is on our website. So go over to the website, and why don't you click on our mailing list, sign yourself up, and you'll get information on when our next podcast is, where they're available, and all the information that you're going to need that we can keep you up to date with. And please subscribe to our podcast and follow us on social media. All right, so that just about ends our podcast for today. And again, it was a little background into who we are, some stories. We have a ton more. And we have plenty of our colleagues that will come on and not only give you great information and great stories, but I think you're really going to enjoy and like it. So I want to say thank you for listening for today. This has been the Film 5.0 podcast with my co-host and co-founder, Steve Hiller. And I think that's it.
Yep. For today. For now.
Thanks, and we'll see you on the next podcast.